there's a truth that's available to each and every one of us, regardless of how old you are, regardless of what background you come from. There is a truth for all mankind. And that truth has been lost. We're not taught it in schools. Our society doesn't bring us up to focus on this truth. And certainly, our religious institutions have forgotten how to teach us what this truth is. Nonetheless, this truth is always there. So I'm simply here today to share the truth as I've seen it, as I've known it. And if that truth can benefit you, if that is something that you can take on in your life, then I hope that you will see the immense difference that it'll make to your life. There's one secret about this truth. It's already here. Right now, it's available. Right now, it is with you. Unfortunately, our mind has no interest in what's going on now. The mind always wants to know about tomorrow. The mind is convinced that there is something called happiness which will come tomorrow. Isn't this true for all of us? There's always another thing. There's always some other purpose to our life. And in fact, we're convinced by our society that the purpose of our life is to fill our days chasing dreams. We're even told, chase your dreams. That is the purpose of your life. Dream big. Don't limit yourself. The world is your oyster. And so from a young age, we see the world as this thing that's full of opportunities. And somehow when we go and find this diamond that's going to give us everlasting happiness, that's when we'll know what peace is. That's when we'll know what joy is. But there's only one group of people that have not taught us to live like this. We call those people spiritual masters, gurus, prophets, wise men. They teach us the opposite. What they say is within you is the diamond. And that's probably the most confusing message that we receive, because what does that mean? Where do we go? What are we looking for? Those of you who come from the Sikh tradition, you'll be very familiar with a teaching from Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Japji Sahib, where he shows us Mat vich ratan jawahar manak. Within your own mind is all the jewels and diamonds and rubies that you could ever ask for. What we find, though, is there are a couple of obstacles that stop us from finding these diamonds. The first is that the mind doesn't know what it's looking for. What does it mean? Within the mind is all the diamonds, jewels, and rubies that you could ask for. It certainly seems to imply that there is something within our mind that is going to give us happiness. Something in our mind that's going to give us all the joy, peace, and fulfillment that we're looking for. But the mind doesn't really know what it's looking for. Isn't that true? When we close our eyes, what do we find? Firstly, it just looks dark and black, and then all the thoughts that we've suppressed, they come back up. First, you start thinking about the jobs that you need to get done today. Then you start worrying, did I switch all the lights off? Did I set the alarm? Did I leave the oven on? Then you start worrying about some of the bigger things that you haven't thought about for some time. Maybe some deep, dark past that we think we've forgotten, that thing starts coming up again. So when we look within our mind, those are the only things that we find. And so we don't actually know that there's any more substance to the mind. With that, we're convinced that this cryptic language of diamonds and jewels, inner peace, this language of finding something within you can't be for you. Maybe we think it's probably true for other people, but there's nothing inside my mind. I've had a look. There's nothing in there. So what does the mind do? The mind does the one thing that it's always done. It looks outside for happiness. It goes back out. Because outside is tried and tested. You accumulate something in your life and it makes you feel happy for a while. So the first problem is the mind has no idea what it's looking for. Then there's a second problem. The mind doesn't actually want to look inside. It's a little bit difficult. It's not easy to go within yourself. So how do we solve some of these problems? Because it's so easy for the mind to be addicted to all the distractions of the world. It's kind of an addiction. I heard a beautiful description of an addiction, which said, any habit that you can't say no to is an addiction. Any habit that you can't say no to. As much as we want to stop our mind and try to meditate and silence the mind is so willing to just go back out again and look for happiness outside that eventually we give up. We don't know where else to look. And even if we've tried, we only try for a little bit. The truth of the matter is the mind is not actually convinced that there is something to be found within us. So how do we go about solving some of these problems? Today I want to go through a verse from the Guru Granth Sahib. And I want us to look at 3 things that we're going to need in order to help us solve this problem. Let's go back to this first line that we talked about already, this first teaching from Guru Nanak's Japji Sahib. Mat vich ratan jawahar manik. Within the mind is all the diamonds, jewels and rubies that you're looking for. But what is the condition? Je ek gur ki sikh suni. If we follow the guidance of the Guru's wisdom. If we listen, if we pay attention to what the wisdom is teaching us. So we need 3 things to help us solve this problem. And the first one is we need higher wisdom. We need guidance. If we look within our own mind, we don't know what we're looking for. So the first thing we need is the higher wisdom itself. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you have really tried in your life to have a good meditation practice? How many of you have tried a little bit and then With good intention, you wanted to carry on, but you never really picked it up again. You know, when you close your eyes and you try really hard with all the will in the world, and you think, yes, I'm really going to follow this advice. The first thing is we don't know what we're looking for. And we spend a little bit of time, and in that little bit of time, we're hoping to get all of the magic, all in one go. A beautiful example that I heard to understand this was that our feeble attempts at meditation is like trying to go to the ocean with a teaspoon and hoping to bring back the entire ocean home. We expect everything to be done in 5 minutes, isn't that true? You close your eyes for 5 minutes, you might chant some mantras, and then you think it should be done. Think about your time at work. If you go to work, you might get paid $20, $30, $50 an hour, maybe $100 an hour. So what is your 10 minutes worth? $5, $10, $15? And you think that within those 5, 10 minutes, you want to get all the diamonds and jewels that the spiritual masters have promised you, just within 5 minutes of effort. You know that your boss only sees your 5 minutes of effort as worth $5, $10, or $15. And yet you want to get enlightenment in those 5 minutes. Such a priceless jewel with so little effort. It's interesting to see how our mind works, how lazy our mind can be. So what do we do? There's a really big question, a very important question, which is, what exactly are we looking for? What is this thing? No more riddles. Real. Talk about something real. What is the actual thing that we're looking for? What does it look like? How do we get there? So I'd like to go through this verse with you. It's a verse by one of the most enlightened masters of India, known as Kabir, Bhagat Kabir ji. He says, Bed kateb if tara pai, dil ka fikr na jaye. He says, oh brother, all the holy scriptures like the Veds, these are just an illusion if anxiety and worry in your heart doesn't depart. All of these holy books that you're reading and all of this wisdom, it's meaningless if it doesn't resolve this constant worry that we have within our mind. Tukdam karari jo karo, hajar hajur khudai. If just for one moment you would stable your mind, you would notice that God Himself is present within you. And those of you will put your hand up and say, but I tried. I closed my eyes for 5 minutes. I certainly didn't find God inside. I just found all of my worries and my problems. I found all of my thoughts. I found all of my frustrations in my mind. But nothing that looked like a God. But yet the Master is saying, for just a moment, if you stabilize yourself, you will see that the divine is present. So the first thing that we learn from this is that the God that you've heard about isn't floating somewhere in the clouds. I like to call that character Mr. God, the one that we look up to when we pray for, when we're asking for things, sitting with white clothes, usually a man with a long white beard, some sort of fatherly figure, and we pray and we ask for things. And no matter what tradition you come from, ultimately your definition of God is some version of that. So the first thing that we're learning from this guidance, this higher wisdom, is that you're looking in the wrong place. Somehow, it's inside of us. When we close our eyes, what do we see? If you go behind all of your thoughts and your worries, what the untrained mind sees is, even if you're not thinking of anything else, you feel like it's just something called me sitting in a dark room. You say, okay, there's nothing else here. There's just me. And that's boring. I don't want to find myself. I know who I am. I know what I feel like. I know what I look like. I'm trying to find God. I'm told by these masters that there's a God inside. But when you close your eyes, there's just me inside. And the way I want you to think about it is, perhaps you just don't know what you're looking for. Perhaps you don't know what you're looking at. You know, if you and I went for a walk and the path that we're walking on is full of rough stones, we assume all of them to be meaningless. Price is just not worth paying for. These stones are just plentiful. But if you were walking with an expert in gems and stones, they might be able to pick out that amongst all of those stones, there's a rough diamond in there. Even if they pick it up and show it to you, you won't be able to see it. Because we're like that untrained mind. We can't see the diamond, but a jeweler, someone who specializes in this, even if it's really rough, they'll be able to see there's a diamond. And you'll say, how did I miss it? Because I didn't know what I was looking for. More importantly, I didn't know what I was looking at. When you close your eyes, you think you just see something called me. The masters are saying you don't know what you're looking at. So what are we looking at? When Kabirji closes his eyes, he says, when I stable my mind, I don't see me inside. He says, I see the divine inside. So when he's closing his eyes, he's seeing something fundamentally different to what you and I see. And with guidance, we can also get there. Remember, he's not saying he has it within him and you don't have it within you. We all have it. He's saying if you just learned how to stabilize yourself, you would be able to see it too. We have to be very careful with our words. For me, I've never been comfortable with this word God. It always feels like some sort of father figure. To me, words like oneness, life force, universe, seems to be something that I can understand a little bit more. So let's replace what Kabirji is saying. Instead of saying that there's a God inside me, he's really saying, I can see the divine force of life within me. I don't just see me inside. And then those of you who are familiar with the structure of how verses in Guru Granth Sahib Ji are put together, there is a central theme with most verses. And the central theme is what Kabir says next. He says, Bande, khoj dil har roj, na phir pareshani mahe. He says, O people, search your heart every single day, and then all of your problems will go away. Bande, khoj dil har roj. Every day search within your own being. And then you will not have the troubles in your life. This gives us the second thing that we need. What did we say the first thing was? We need three things in order to solve this riddle. The first was higher wisdom. We need that higher wisdom. We need that guidance. The second is we need to practice it again and again and again. If you have children, one of the most frustrating things is when you want them to start something new, maybe swimming, maybe a new instrument, music, maybe a new skill. Sometimes children, if they don't fall in love with it straight away, they don't want to do it more than 1 or 2 times. And you have to explain to them, you're not going to learn how to play that instrument just in one go. You need to practice. But when you practice it and you put the effort in, you will be able to find the result that you're looking for. I hear this time and time again from adults who are highly skilled musicians. They say, I'm so thankful to my parents that they forced me to keep practicing, because now I can see the benefit of all of that hard work. So the Guru, the masters, they're talking to us like we're their children. We must also put in that practice, even if we don't understand it. Why do you do that? If you're learning an instrument, the inspiration is the teacher in front of you. You say, I want to be able to play the way you can play. When we're standing in front of the masters, we say, I want to live the way you live. I want to think the way you think. I want to experience life the way you experience life. Because if you can do it, then surely I can do it. The only difference is you've put in the time and effort, and you've had the right guidance. Surely if I apply those same things, there's nothing wrong with me, I should be able to do it too. So the second thing that we need, apart from the higher wisdom, is the practice. Bande khoj dil har roj. Every day, search within your own self. Which, remember what the problem is? We don't know what we're looking for. So let's get clarity. What exactly are we looking for? Kabirji says he's found the divine within him. Kabirji, within this central theme, also gives us a little bit more motivation. In the next line of this verse, he says, "Eh jo duniya sheher mela dastagiri nae." He says, you should search inside, because this world is like a magic show. Everything is an illusion. Nothing is actually real. The magician holds up something in his hand and then the next second, it's gone. It's disappearing. He says this whole world is like an illusion. Nothing you see is real. Nothing is something that you can hold on to. So there's some motivation for us. Because what he's suggesting is that outside, where you've gone to look for happiness, that happiness isn't a real happiness. What he's saying is inside there's something more longer lasting. There's a real happiness inside of us. Outside is almost pretend happiness. It's fake. Just like you get delighted for a moment that the magician reveals the trick. You say, wow, I didn't know how you did that. How long does that excitement last? Just for a few seconds. Kabirji is saying the whole world is like that. Nothing is going to last. But inside there is something more longer lasting. And again, it goes back to some of those problems of the mind. We're not convinced, probably because we haven't put the practice in. We don't believe that there is actually something worth finding inside, because when we try, we just see the same dark room. But think about it from your own experience. What do you know about spending a few minutes in a dark room with all the lights off? Immediately when you switch the lights off, you can't see anything. But after a few minutes, what happens? Your eyes start to adjust. After a few minutes, you can see what you couldn't see before. It's not that the things in the room appeared. It's not that the things in the room weren't there before. You needed some time to adjust. Once you adjust, you see what is already there. Kabir ji is saying the same thing. Practice every day and you will see something that is already there. He's simply telling you, I've seen it, I've been there, I've done it, I'm telling you what you're going to find. And it is so much more amazing than anything that is out there in the world. Doesn't that sound enticing? Doesn't that sound like something worth looking into? Because he says nothing outside has lasted. And we know this to be true. Nothing outside has stayed with you forever. Even your own body is not the body that you were born with. Sometimes you're surprised when a new baby is born, how small they really are. And you think, did I used to be that small? That doesn't feel like me. You look at old pictures of yourself as a child. Is that who I was? I don't remember that. That doesn't feel like me. And yet everyone is telling you, yes, that was you. Where has that gone? Where has that original house gone that you were born into? Where are those people that you used to spend time with? Sometimes you look in the photos and you say, who are those people that are in the photo with me? Nothing has ever lasted. And nothing that you have with you now is going to last. And that's more of a scary thought, because once you've spent a lot of time building your life, you think, this is it, I'm done now. I went to school and got the education. I worked hard, got my qualifications. I built a career and got my job. I got a home. I built a family. This is it. I'm done now. I've created the life that I wanted to create. And Kabirji says something very scary. He says, none of those things are going to last. And that's a truth, that's a reality that we don't want to face. And he says, go back to your meditation and you will see that what he is saying to be is true. In fact, think about this. It is so true that you can hold on to nothing, that even every breath that you take in has to be let out again. You cannot even hold on to a single breath. Nothing else is going to be yours. Motivation. Sometimes the masters give us inspiration, and sometimes the masters give us a little bit of fear and say, this is coming. This reality is coming. Go within yourself. Find something that will keep you going through the ups and downs of life. But what is that thing that you have to do? You have to practice. You have to put the effort in. The diamond is not free. Even if you found a rough diamond, it has no value. You have to put the effort in to smoothen it, to shape it, before the real value comes out. You have to put that effort in within yourself. And the truth of the matter is, you haven't been shown how to do this. We've not been taught what this is. The world has not encouraged us to look in. The world that we live in encourages us to look out. So let's learn a little bit further. What is Kabirji saying? Darog pad pad khushi hoye, bekhabar baad bakahe. People who don't know, people who are ignorant of this higher truth, the religious types, the ones that pretend that they know, they read all the religious books and then they try and explain it to other people. They're very happy just reading the religious books, very happy attending the lectures, very happy listening to the seminars. But they don't know. But because they can explain it, they start talking to other people like they know. They're very happy staying at that level. Hak sach khalak khalak myane shyama murat nae. But there is a truth, the ultimate truth, that there is a divine within you. There is a truth within all of creation. Those people, they don't know that. They've just read about it. He says that ultimate divine source of life is everywhere, within all of creation. He specifically says he's not in the murti of Krishna. It's not out there. It's not in your religious institutions. It's not in the idols that you bow your head down to. It's not in the cross of Jesus that you wear around your neck. It's not in any of those things. It's deep within you. You have to know where to look. You have to know how to find it. All of your religions have become about worshipping something else, something greater. God, Allah, Krishna, Vaheguru. It's always something else, something greater out there. But the real master is telling you, you're looking in the wrong place. It's inside you. It's deep within you. But the ignorant religious people have spent their life convincing you that they know what they're talking about when they start telling you that it's because you haven't done the right religious practices that you haven't got all the blessings in your life. You haven't woken up at the right time. You're not wearing the right religious clothes. You're not eating the right religious food. You're not saying the right religious words. This is what they're convincing you of. That the things that you need to do in your day-to-day life need to change. The real masters are telling you, you need to search within your own self. How many of us are genuinely trying to look within ourselves? How many of us can say, in all honesty, we try every day, we put that effort in? Kabir ji goes on to say, Asman mein aane lahang darya, gusal kardan boond. He said, instead of looking in the sky above, there's a sky within you. And within that sky, there is a holy river inside you. He said, that is the holy river that you were meant to bathe in. Within you is a holy river. That is what you are meant to bathe in. He's directly challenging all of these religious ideas. And we have them in every tradition. And think about it. Every tradition, every pilgrimage is all about doing something on the outside. It's never about the mind that you go and do those acts with. It's always about the act itself. Kabir says, there is a holy river inside you. And that is the holy river in which you were meant to bathe in. But you haven't found it. You don't know what it is. We still believe going to our temples makes us good people. That's a good thing to do. Some people go every day. Some people go first thing in the morning. Some people go at the end of the day. Some people say, at least once a week I go. Some people say, every year on my birthday at least I go. And then there are those who only go when they're desperately in need of something. They forget about it the rest of the time. And then they think, oh, I need to go to this special temple, gurdwara, church, and go and make my prayers there. Some people only go at the time of funerals, because then they realize, oh, this is going to happen to me too. But it doesn't matter where you go or how often you go, because you're convinced that going there is somehow going to solve your problems. So these masters are telling you, what is the point of going to those temples if it doesn't reveal your inner temple? If it doesn't show you that there is a divine within you. You know, one of the most beautiful things about going to a temple is if you notice how your behavior changes. Have you noticed how holy you become? How soft-spoken you become? You walk very carefully. Even though the rest of the day you don't act in that way. But in the temple, Waheguru, Waheguru, Waheguru. You're praying. It's as though God is listening, God is watching you, so you better be on your best behavior. Don't we do that? Maybe if God is not watching, at least all the other attendees are watching, so people will look at you and say, wow, he's so spiritual. Notice how your behavior changes. You don't do that in your own homes. In fact, you're on your best behavior when you're in the temple. Then you're sort of on good behavior when you are out in public. You're on sort of medium behavior when you're at work, because you know you might get fired if you don't act well. But when you come home, when you're with your family, that's when you can be yourself. You know, the people that you are supposed to be the kindest to, your own loved ones, your family members, those are the people that we're worse to. And to members of the public, hello, how are you? Good morning. Hope you have a nice day. What's going on? Everything is in reverse. The reason you're on your best behavior when you go to your temples is because you know that's not your home. You're convinced that that is God's home. There is some Holy Spirit there of some sort. Some deity, some magnificent being. This is God's home. The creator of all of this lives here. What is the masters saying? What are the gurus saying? This is God's home. Go here and find that God exists here, the divine exists here. This is why the gurus and the masters are not fake. They're not pretending to be on their best behavior, because they're always in the presence of God. Wherever they go, they're consistent in their behavior, because they're always in the presence of God. That's where they live. They live in God's home. But we're just convinced that going to these temples is good every now and then, makes us good people. So start finding your inner temple. And in the ending lines, Kabir ji says, Kar fakkar daim laye chashme, jahe taha mawjood. He says, meditate always. He goes back to that second thing that we need, higher wisdom and practice. He says, always meditate. He says, put your glasses on so you can see clearly. There's something in here. Do it properly. You know, it's almost as though a teacher's in a school and they're asking the pupil to read out the lesson that's on the board. And the child is sort of squinting his eyes and making a half-hearted attempt. And the teacher says, put your glasses on, read clearly. Do you know what you're reading? Have you practiced it? Did you do the homework? Kabirji is saying the same thing to you. If you do, then you will see that God is everywhere, in all places. You will know if you put your glasses on, if you practice, if you meditate. If you're learning an instrument, the teacher first, when you go into the classroom, they'll say, show me last week's lesson. Did you practice? Did you do it? If not, I'm not going to teach you the next lesson. My children always are the most motivated 1 hour before the music lesson. Quick, let me get the notes out. Let me quickly practice last week's lesson. And then they say, oh, I forgot to write it down. I don't even know what last week's lesson was. So if you're going to go in front of this master, you have to be willing to do the work. If you're going to learn from this teacher, you have to be willing to do the homework. If you do, Kabirji ends with what you will find. He gives this name of this divine. He calls it Allah. He says, Allah pakang pak hai. He says that divine is the purest thing that you have ever known. The sweetest, purest thing that you have ever known. Shak karo je dusar hoye. He says, I don't doubt it, that I have found that ultimate divine. He said, I would doubt it if there was something else that could be found. He goes inside and looks within himself. He says, there is nothing else. Notice the difference. When you look within yourself, what do you see? You see something called me. You close your eyes, you see your thoughts, and if you're not thinking about anything else, you think, oh, well, it's just me. I'm just here in this dark room. Know that your teachers have also gone through that same struggle and have got to the point where they're saying, I've seen clearly what is actually here, and there isn't something else. There is just the divine. Notice what he's saying is not there. He's not saying, I am there and I am looking at God. He said, there is only God here. There's a real clue in this. He says, when I close my eyes and I look within my own heart, I see only the divine. In fact, now I don't even question what else there is, because I know there is only that one source, that one universal life force, that divine spirit. There is nothing else here. So he can see clearly. And if we can't see it, one of the lessons that we must learn is when we close our eyes and we see this thing called me, the first lesson is that's a misdiagnosis. When you close your eyes and you say, there's nothing else here, there's just me and my thoughts, he says, you're not seeing clearly. Like even if you put your glasses on and your glasses are covered in steam. You ever have that when you come out of the shower, you put your glasses on and they're just covered in steam? You're looking in the mirror and you can't see clearly. That's the way you and I are all understanding what is here. We are all seeing with steamed glasses. He's saying you're not seeing clearly. There is something else here. How many of us were ever taught this in school? How many of us were taught this in our religious institutions? He's saying this is a misdiagnosis. You've misunderstood what is in here. It's not something called me. It is something called God. Not Mr. God. The divine spirit of life is here. He can see it clearly. And he's encouraging us, look deeper. Spend a bit of time and you will unlock this diamond. So we know we need that higher wisdom. We know we need to practice. And within the last line, he tells us the final thing that we need. Kabir karam kareem ka o kare jane soye. He says, when I found it, I realized this was a blessing. This is the blessing of the divine, the merciful divine. One can only understand themselves if the divine allows it. So the final thing that we need after higher wisdom and practice is divine grace. But what does that mean? What is divine grace? Divine grace is the thing that's going to get you up out of your beds and motivate you to actually go deeper and look within yourself. Because as soon as you go back home and you give it a try and you're going to say, okay, this time I'm really going to do it. Your mind is going to say after about 5 minutes, what's the point? My life is okay. Do I really need to do this? It's like my children when they say, Mom, Dad, I want to learn how to play the guitar. And they try for months and months to convince you, get me a guitar. I want to learn. And then when they're doing the effort, they're saying, I'm not really sure I want to play the guitar anymore. You know that frustrating feeling? You spent months having to hear this from your children, and yet when it's time to put the effort in, they say, oh, I don't know if I want to play the guitar anymore. I think I want to get some roller skates. Something completely different. So what's going to motivate you? When you go home and you try this, you're going to say, my life's okay. I have a good life. I don't need to do all this meditation. The reality is that you may pretend to other people that you're fine. In fact, when you ask anyone, you say, how are you? You say, I'm fine. You're not fine. And you know that you're not fine. You know that there's something missing deep within your heart. Something deeper is missing. And you've tried to buy your way out of your troubles, and it hasn't worked. You know that there's something missing. That's the first blessing that you were given. This uncomfortable feeling inside of you that knows there's something more to life. And that uncomfortable feeling is the one thing that you've tried to keep filling with new relationships, new gadgets, new toys, new experiences. And it's never filled that gap within you. So you're not fine, as much as we like to pretend in front of other people. So this is what the masters are presenting to you. And it's for every single one of you. No matter who you are, no matter what your background is, no matter how many times you've tried before to look for it, it's still there. So the question is, with the right guidance, with the right practice, and with that blessing, once you have that perfect combination, will you be able to find it?
A recent study has shown that over 75% of Sikhs say that their life feels stressful or overwhelming. These feelings can develop into depression, alcohol abuse, or even suicide. We believe that Guru Nanak's wisdom can help transform people's lives. Nanak Naam relies on your donation to help create more videos and podcasts like this to educate people all over the world on how to use Guru Nanak's teachings to improve their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Set up a monthly donation today and help change someone's life. Visit nanaknaam.org/donate.
So we've got a question which is, God is within us. So what is the importance of satsang and going to the Gurdwara?
So the question is, if God is within us, what is the value in going to the Gurdwara, attending satsangs, which means a union of truth? It's a beautiful analogy that the spiritual masters give. And they say, I've heard of heaven, and I know that everyone wants to go to heaven when they die. They say, I don't know where that heaven is where people claim to go when they die, but I've found heaven in the satsang. They say, how do you know that you're in the company of spiritual people? The definition of satsang, the company of spiritual people, is where oneness is being discussed. Where only oneness, the ultimate truth of oneness, is being taught, is being discussed, is being shared. So, while the truth is within all of us, we really do need the help of people around us. I like to think that if you're starting a new career, one of the best ways to excel in that career is to have a mentor, is to be surrounded by others who have already taken those steps, who have gone further in that career than you have. Why? So you can learn from their mistakes. You can benefit from their experience. So that is the value of going and spending time with other people who are in this same stage of life as you, where they're prioritizing their spiritual growth over worldly growth. Now, I know that is not what the question was asking. But that is the real meaning of satsang. The truth of the matter is that that is not what we experience when we go to the gurdwaras, when we go to the temples, when we go to our churches. What we experience is simply a tribe, a group of people that we've identified with, that we align ourselves with. Whether those people are in search of that higher truth or not, the truth of the matter is that all human beings feel like they want to connect to a tribe. I like to think that the human being is not a polar bear. There are certain animals that are created to just live their entire life on their own. But humans, we're not like that. We really crave that interaction, which is why we align ourselves with groups. Whether it's a religious group, whether it's a group based on your heritage and your background, whether it's a group based on your hobbies and your interests, there's a lot of comfort that comes in being in your social circles. But that is not the definition of Sangat. That's not the definition of Satsang. The people who turn up to your temples and churches and gurdwaras are not your Sangat. The word Sangat comes from Sang, those who are close. The word Sang means to be close to someone. Those who are close to the divine, those who are close to the ultimate truth, Satsang. There is immense value in us spending time with them. But you can take confidence in knowing that you may not be finding them in the places where you think they are. So the question you then have to ask yourself is, where should I go to find the right, true company of holy masters?
Vijay, I've heard your podcasts and videos in the past, and I still go through them. And you mentioned there is no good or bad. It's all how we interpret things. But with my limited knowledge, when I see things through, there are things which are bad. There are people who are cruel, narcissists, rapists, and we go through. But God is one, so there is God in them too. How do you accept them, forgive them, and show love or empathy towards them? It's pretty hard. How do you do that?
That's a brilliant question, thank you. So the question is around how do you show love and empathy towards people who are cruel? And how do you avoid labeling them as good or bad? The truth of the matter is that we label people as good or bad. We label situations as good or bad based on how they affect us. We are the barometer. We are the thing that decides whether it's good or bad. If it serves us in some way, we decide that it is good. If it serves our community, our people, we think it is good. If it harms us in any way, or our community, our people, then it is bad. But the way that I've learnt not to place those judgments is to realize that nobody is acting out of their own free will. Everybody is acting out of their own programming, their own conditioning, which means that you or I have no freedom to act. Guru Nanak is very clear on this. I like to quote the Japji Sahib because that is a verse that many of us may be familiar with. And he says, Akhand jor chupain nah jor, jor na mangan den na jor. He says, you have no power to speak, no power to remain silent. Jor na jivan maran na jor. You have no power to create life or to destroy life. Jis hath jor kar vekha soe. Nanak uttam neech na koe. That divine oneness is deciding everything. The reason we've not been comfortable with this idea is that makes us feel like we're slaves to some God sitting in the sky. And nobody wants to be a slave. Everyone wants to think that they're free. I don't see it as a slave. For me, I see it as us being an instrument and God being the one who is playing the instrument. That is why you see the beautiful iconography of Krishna playing his flute. We are the flute. Krishna is playing the music. And when you understand that there is no good or bad flute, they're all just different varieties, all being played by that same musician, that's where compassion comes in. That you do not know what you are doing. We see this when Jesus was on the cross and he called out and he said, "Forgive them, Father. They do not know what they're doing." He does not show anger towards the people that have put him on the cross. He says, "Please show forgiveness for them. They don't know what they're doing." And the truth is, none of us know what we're doing. If you think you have free will, if you think you create all of your own actions and all of your own thoughts, a simple way to disprove that is tell me what your next thought is going to be. Does anyone know? What is your next thought? If you try, you'll simply notice that you have to wait and the thought will come. You do not create that thought. And if every action you have ever done has come from a thought that you did not create, where is your question of free will? So of course, as a society, we have to determine that certain actions are desirable and certain actions are not desirable. And those are the labels that I think are more healthy. This is what is working for us as a group. As a collective, we all need everyone to act a certain way, to contribute in a certain way. If somebody goes outside of that, that's no longer working for this group. And in humanity, we should use the same language. This is no longer behavior that serves the greater good. But that doesn't mean that that individual is bad. They do not know what they're doing because you don't know what you're doing. And rather than us focusing on the behaviors of other people, let's go right back to ourselves. What are we doing? Are we acting out of unconsciousness or are we acting out of awareness? So it can be very hard when we see cruelty in the world. It can be very painful to see that. Your action, whether you choose to do something to protect someone else based on whatever is happening to them, is also not your action. And this is where it becomes very difficult for us to see what's going on, because everything seems to be something that we are actively involved with. The truth of the matter is, if someone is attacking someone else, if you're close enough, if you're motivated enough, you will do something about it. On the other side of the world, if something is happening, you may not be close enough, you may not be motivated enough, and you won't do something about it. Does that make you a bad person for not acting? Or does that mean simply the circumstances have presented themselves in such a way that you do or you don't act based on however the condition is within that time? First, learn how you yourself are acting. When you start to realize that you have no control over what is going to happen next, it allows you to sit back and simply enjoy the game of life, including the ups and the downs, including the good and the bad.
So you've just explained about कि कुछ भी अपने हाथ च नहीं हैगा, then where does karma come into place then? So they say karmi apo apni ke nede ke dur.
Thank you. So the question is, if nothing is in our hands, then how do we explain ideas like karma, karam? Unfortunately, the word karam is one of those misunderstood terms. And we think that karam means things that are written down for you, somehow things that are predetermined for you. But there are many different ways that even within the scriptures of Gurbani, the word karam is used. Karam is used to mean your actions. Karam is also used to mean grace. And it's interesting that your actions and divine grace is the same word. What that means to me is your actions are divine grace. Whatever the divine does becomes your actions. Now, the easiest way to understand karam is consequences. There is no denying that when you do something, it will have a consequence. So, your pichle karam, your previous actions, have the consequence of you sitting here right now. Everything that has had to happen in the past to lead up to this moment is your previous karam. That is the only way to then allow you to understand that whatever will happen tomorrow is a direct result of how I act right now. I have no interest in what happened in my previous life or my next life. I don't remember what I was in my last life, and chances are I'll have no idea of what is happening in the next life, nor will I remember any of this. So for me, I discount anything to do with the life before this body was born. If I have no memory of it, it is as though it didn't exist. Whether those things have an impact on this life, I don't know. It could be that who you were in the previous lives have somehow created the scenario that you're in right now. I don't know. Or it could just be a nice story that we tell ourselves. But your previous actions up till this point determine what will happen right now. How you act right now, your karam now, your actions now, will determine what happens in the next moment. If you are cruel to someone, that will have a ripple effect. They will have an emotional reaction. They will then react back to you. They will then get frustrated and go do something else or speak about you to someone else. These are all the consequences of you acting in a certain way. So what it does is it makes you be more responsible. Everything I do right now is a drop in the pond, and every single action will have that ripple effect. So what action will you take next? That's something that we then have to ask ourselves.
Sasikibaji, just a question, like how can we conquer or control panch vikar? The Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar.
Not small questions here today. The question is, how do we overcome 5 vices? Lust, greed, anger, attachment, ego. It's very interesting that when you study the wisdom called Gurmat, the Guru's mindset, it doesn't show you how to overcome these things individually. It doesn't have one technique for overcoming desires, another technique for anger management, another technique for dealing with your attachments. We do not have entire chapters dedicated to this. They're all bunched together. And what they say is that these are just symptoms of a much deeper problem. So you are not to deal with your 5 vices. You are to deal with the underlying root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is something called I am. Main hega, I exist. Ho main, I am. If you were to translate this word ho main, the easiest word to translate it to is myself. Ho main, me. Your myself is a problem that you've never asked, how do I deal with that? Because we don't want to deal with the myself. In fact, we want to have a happy, good me and get rid of all the negative parts of me. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be frustrated all the time. I want to be kinder in how I speak to people. I don't want to be a victim to my desires. I want to be good. The Guru says, you can't do this. You can't say on a coin, I don't want heads, but I only want tails. Both of them have to exist, or none of them have to exist. So there is no wisdom to get rid of your panchvikar, to get rid of these 5 vices. There is only wisdom to get rid of your I amness. Are you interested in getting rid of that? I am. The very idea that you exist is your biggest problem. Haume dirag roga hai. The ultimate disease is called myself. Daru bhi is my. But the medicine is also within that. Kirpa kare je apne, ta gur ka shabad kamaye. If you are lucky enough to recognize the ego and know that it exists, how are you going to do that? By Gur ka Shabad, by the Guru's teachings, by the Guru's wisdom. Once you have higher wisdom only attacks one thing, the I am. Get rid of me, you get rid of all the other problems that are symptoms of the me, the good and the bad. And the simple technique that Guru Nanak brings to the world to get rid of the me, he says, you are singing your own song all day. All day, every day, your story is about me. This internal dialogue that seems to start as soon as we wake up in the morning. I have to do this, I need to do that, I need to drop the kids to school, then I've got to go work, I haven't checked my email, my boss is probably emailing me, then I haven't done this, then I haven't done that. That story goes on right from the minute that you're born. You don't ask, how do I solve that problem? That is the mechanism by which your ego exists. Me, 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 all the time. The Guru says you don't have to go anywhere special. You don't have to wear some special clothes. You don't have to learn some special prayers. You simply change the dialogue that's going on in your mind. And he says the dialogue that should be going on is not about this fake imposter that's living in here called me. The dialogue that's going on is you, tu hi, tu hi, tu hi. This is you, this is you. That divine, the truth, you call out, you sing that song. Sing the song all the time, this is you, this is you, this is you. And luckily you can do that wherever you are. You don't have to be in some special ashram. You don't have to go away on a 10-day silent retreat. You don't have to change religion. You don't have to wear special religious clothes. All day, every day, recognize how does my ego exist. It exists in the words that are going on in my mind. How do I get rid of the ego? Change the words. And it is such a powerful technique. When you're labeling things as good or bad, this is you, this is you, this is you, this is you. When you're looking at your own reflection in the mirror, all the negative thoughts come out because you can't even stand to look at your own face in the mirror. All of your insecurities come out, all of your fears, all the things that you dislike about yourself. Most people, they don't see what looks good in the mirror. They're just looking at all the things that they would like to change. This is you, this is you, this is you. Even the reflection in your mirror, this is you. Every step that is being taken, this is you. Every breath that is being taken, this is you. That is the thing that you need to focus on. And that's a much bigger problem than your 5 vices. Because there are some people who believe they've gotten rid of their 5 vices. They're the ones that think, I am holy, I am special. But they still think, I am. The masters are saying, I am not. Nothing is me, everything is you. So you cannot get rid of your 5 vices without getting rid of the ego that's underlying those.
Hello, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Mera question is, like, what is Amrit Vela and what we get from this tuk? Amrit Vela Sach Nau Vadiyai Vichar Karmi Ave Kappada Nadri Muktwar.
So the question is, what is Amrit Vela? The golden hour, the nectar moment, Amrit Vela. And the quote given from the Japji Sahib has to be understood by seeing the question that comes before it. You know the question before it? The question says, Fer ke agge rakhiye jit dise darbar. Mahau ke bolan boliye jit sun tare pyar, amrit vela sach nau vadiyai vichar. So the general understanding is that spiritual masters have recommended to wake up early in the morning and practice changing the words in your head to spiritual language. Make that the first thing that you do. And you'll notice that most of us, when we wake up, the dialogue that goes off in our head is like we're already late for 10 things. There's already 10 things that we haven't done the moment that we've woken up. So if you try and meditate when you wake up at your normal time, you're then fighting with all those other responsibilities and priorities that are bombarding your mind. The masters say, wake up when you don't have to deal with all of those things just yet. Simple example, if you have to get up and straight away start getting ready for work, make your breakfast, drop the kids to school, all those sorts of things, that starts at a certain time. Notice when you wake up in the middle of the night. Notice when you can't sleep. There is nothing else to do. It's not that all those things aren't there. They will be there at the appropriate time in the morning. But there is a golden hour before that. It says that that hour is sweet like honey. Amrit Vela. It is the moment of honey, the moment of sweet nectar. Because that is the only time that you can sit and actually be free from that bombardment of your mind. So the question before that verse comes up is, what offering should I have made in order for me to have seen God? Thinking that most people assume that you have to go to a temple somewhere. The tradition is that you go to a temple, you make an offering, you take some flowers, you take some fruit, you take something and say, God, I wish to have your vision. Fer ke agge rakhiye, jit disse darbar, where I can see your grandeur. What words should I speak? What prayers should come out of my mouth? Moho ke bolan boliye, jit sun tare pyar. So the first thing is, what am I supposed to give up? What is my offering? He says, give up your time. Give up your time. Because when you wake up at your normal hour, your self-importance kicks in. All the things that you need to do. He said, if you don't want to make your life about your self-importance, you want to see God, wake up a little bit earlier, when your self-importance is a little bit diminished. That is the offering that you should make. That is the commitment. What words should I speak that I may hear and feel your love? Amrit Vela Sachinao. In the early hours of the morning, speak the name of the ultimate truth. Recite the highest wisdom, Vadiyai Vichar. So, again, it is not prescriptive, saying that you must only do a certain prayers from a certain scripture. Whatever your tradition is, whatever your background is, try the very practical wisdom of waking up slightly earlier than you need to. But be very clear on what you're doing. You're not saying words that somehow God is awake at that time and listening and making a tally. Did he wake up this morning? Yep. Or he missed that day. Or I'm going to put a cross against his name. See, what we've done is we've made God into Santa Claus. You better watch out. You better not cry. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. That's what we've done. The songs that we sang as children to a fictitious character called Santa Claus, we grew up into adults and we carried on believing in that Santa Claus, except we called it God. So we think God is looking and watching, like, again, some guy sitting in the clouds. There is no one sitting in the clouds. Badla ch koi nahi baitha. There is no one there. Stop looking up there. How will you wake up in the morning knowing that there is no one out there? You'll do one of two things. You'll either say, no one there. I don't need to do anything. Or, there is still a truth, but I've just been looking in the wrong places. So, it is a very practical spiritual guidance that has been around for as long as spiritual wisdom has been around. Wake up earlier than your mind starts bombarding you and make a story about the divine truth, not about your life. Sing those words and notice how that starts to add fragrance throughout the rest of your day.
I've got a question around housekeeping rules in Gurdwara. As we know, we all go to Gurdwara and then we are told off to take off our socks and then cover our heads. Especially around covering our heads, we're told off by our granthis if it's even the dupatta is slightly off. I wanted to know the purpose of covering our head. If God's within us and around us or everywhere we go, why are we only covering heads in Gurdwara? Why not everywhere else?
That's a brilliant question. Thank you so much. There's a very short answer. They don't know what they're talking about. Because if not covering your head is a sin, then you were born as a sinner. Now bear in mind that we come from a culture. Ancient Indian culture was that a sign of respect was that you covered your head. That's just how the culture is. I don't know why. That's just how the culture developed. My mother tells me a story of her grandfather sitting in the village. And he would sit on the porch and he would just be looking at kids coming and going from school. And anyone who went by without their head covered, he would shout at them, regardless of what background they were from, what religion they were from. He would say, has someone died in your house? If not, cover your head. In the ancient Indian culture, you took your headgear off when someone had passed away. So that's how he was implementing a very simple cultural rule, cover your head. What I like to think is that it's a sign of royalty. It elevates your thinking. I can tell you from my own personal experience, from childhood, having had the blessing of being brought up within the Sikh tradition, my head was always covered when I went out the house. And I cannot tell you what a sense of responsibility it gives me knowing that you're carrying something far greater than just yourself when you're walking around. I knew from a very young age, whether I understood the wisdom or not, that you represented something bigger. And so when you're walking around with that, my friends would get up to all sorts of things in school. And I knew I couldn't partake in those. I knew I didn't want to participate in those because I represented something bigger. Something greater. And that was simply by having my head covered. I was a walking, talking representative. My youngest son recently started a few years ago in local army. So he was probably around 11 or 12 when he joined the army. On a weekend, he would go sort of 2 or 3 nights of the week. And you should see the transformation in him when he has to wear the army uniform. We were surprised to see this young boy take himself so seriously as soon as he's wearing an outfit of a soldier in the army. The way he stood, the way he walked, everything changed for the moment that he's wearing that uniform. Nobody has taught him to stand up straight, but he noticed a change within himself. And for me, how I reflected on that is that when you wear a certain uniform, you know that you're on duty. Everybody around you will look at you as a representative of something good, something that represents someone who's on duty. To me, I can only share with you why I look the way I do. When I look like this, as soon as I leave the house, I have this on my head, I'm never off duty. All day, every day, I'm on duty. I never get to take this uniform off. So for me, it represents that I am part of something greater. I am a demonstration that there is a higher way to live. That you represent something greater, that there are better ways for human beings to live. That's why I wear it. Now, when someone in the Gurudwara tells you off for not doing it, that's not what they're doing. They're simply reinforcing a cultural norm. They don't necessarily even understand why they're doing it. If they knew why they were doing it, they would not do it with the harsh tone that they use. They would do it with love and compassion. They would explain to you what you represent. It's like somebody who has a uniform and their sleeve is torn. You would explain to them, this represents something bigger. Make sure you tidy yourself up because you're a walking, talking representative of something much greater than yourself. But they don't use compassion. In fact, it is off-putting when they speak to you in that way. And you don't feel like going back there. That's how you know that they don't know what they're talking about.
We've got a question here, Vijay, if I can just ask you from the list that we have. Do you mind sharing examples of what seva is? And what are the practical examples for a family with young kids of seva that can be done together as a family?
So the question is to provide examples of what is seva. The word seva means service, acts of service. And where this question is coming from is within the Sikh tradition, there is a very high culture of service. A lot of importance is placed on doing acts of service throughout the community, within your own family, within your temples. Unfortunately, the word seva has been hijacked to mean actions of service rather than a mindset of service. And within the wisdom, this is why I keep going back to finding out what the true meanings of things are. You must be reading this wisdom. You must access this wisdom yourself. Within the wisdom, within the scriptures, there is only one seva, and that is called service to the Guru. Satgur ki seva. There is almost no mention of community service. And yet the entire Sikh community has now been misguided to think that a good Sikh is one who spends a lot of time doing community service, when yet the master of your own wisdom is telling you that you have to serve the teacher, serve the wisdom. So then the question is, how do you serve the teacher? If you have a teacher and you are the student, what is the best thing that the teacher wants from you? To follow the teachings. The only way to serve a teacher is to learn, to be studious, to be the best student possible. That is Satgur ki seva. Again and again and again, we're being misguided by the people who sit on stages within our religious institutions that are telling you incorrect definitions of service. And because we don't read the wisdom ourselves, we're blindly following what they're saying. There is almost no mention of community service within the wisdom. Now, that's not to say that community service isn't important. It's a wonderful thing to do. Sikhs are well known around the world for their service to humanity. But we have become a small fraction of what a real meaning of a Sikh is, a real student of this wisdom. Whenever you see a report online where somebody goes to the Golden Temple in Amritsar, what is the first thing that they tell you about the Golden Temple? This is the place where they serve 150,000 meals every day. Really? That's the most important thing? Then they tell you that it has a building made with gold. That's the most important thing? No. That is not the most important thing. That has become the most important thing. And when you tell a lie 1,000,000 times, it becomes a truth. So now we don't even know how to speak about our holiest of centers without saying we serve 150,000 meals a day. If you stopped serving those meals, would it become any less important? Then there is something more important in that space. It is the space where the ultimate truth exists, where timeless wisdom has been recorded and has been preserved, where men, women, and children have fought and died to protect that wisdom. I like to think about it like you see these fantasy movies, and you go down some deep, dark cave, and there's like a shining light in this cave, and there's this old ancient text that's there. And then you see some people coming out of the shadows, and they say, we're the protectors of this wisdom. What do you think the Khalsa is? The protectors of ultimate truth. We are here to preserve that wisdom, to serve that wisdom, to act it, and to spread it to the world. Because it is a wisdom for everyone. It is a truth for all beings. That is the true meaning of seva. To be dedicated, to make your life a service to this wisdom. Once you do that, your automatic reaction will be to make your life about others. But it is time to stop feeding people's bellies and start feeding people's hearts, minds, and souls.
So, Kabir, my question is, what is hukum, and what is hukum, and how do we surrender to the hukum? And is it some sort of predestiny, or is it something which happens day to day based on our karma? So, more important, how do we surrender to it? Thank you.
So the question is, what is hukum? The word hukum has generally been translated as divine command. The language that's used around hukum is the universal life force, the oneness, God, is like a king. And everything that is happening is his command. He is declaring out what he wants to happen next, and the universe acts in such a way. So much so that the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars are all under that divine command. For me, I've had to try to change my own understanding when I feel that a certain translation doesn't work with the original concept of oneness. The concept of oneness takes away this idea that there is a God sitting in the clouds. In fact, it is a universal life force that is everywhere. It's in the stars and the planets, but it's also in us. Guru Nanak's wisdom says that if you are to know what this oneness is, if you are to connect with it, connect with the hukum. The very first Q&A within the scripture of Guru Nanak, the first question and answer, give sachiara hoye, give kure tutte pal. How does truth happen? How does falsehood break? Hukam razai chalana. walk on the path of hukum, that divine command. Align yourself with the divine command. In order to understand that, for me, the word that aligns best with hukum in English is reality. Now think of your question again. What is hukum is simply what is reality. And then Guru Nanak goes on to explain, hukum hai andar sabko, bahar hukum na koe. Everything is within reality, nothing is outside of reality. Where the wisdom is so beautifully explained is saying, if you want to know the ultimate truth, align yourself with what is happening now. Reality. Everything that is happening in this moment, good or bad, is reality. How you understand that is when you start to look at your own mind. The one place that your mind isn't is here and now. What your mind is always doing is trying to fix the situation. Wherever you are right now. Some of you are thinking, my chair is uncomfortable. Some of you are thinking, I wish there was more leg room so I could stretch my legs. Someone was thinking, oh, I hope this ends soon. I don't know if I've put enough money in the parking meter. We're always trying to change something. When we're in the supermarket and we're trying to buy something, we're looking at the queue and thinking, why is the queue that I'm in the longest one? Why don't they open another till? All those things, just constantly looking at reality and thinking, I know how to make it better. I know how to make the universe better. That's what our mind is doing all the time. In our small little thinking, I know how to make the universe better. And that is the cause of misery. Whatever is happening right now, our mind thinks that we know better. And our mind thinks, if only that was happening. If that was happening, I'd be happy. But the truth of the matter is, because your mind is constantly creating the habit of trying to improve the situation, you never get to the point where your mind is happy. You're always creating a fantasy within your mind that there is something else that's better. Even in the smallest of details, even when you look out the window and you're not happy with the weather, I know what the weather should have been today. Guru Nanak says, if you want to become truthful, you need to let go of the falsehood which exists within your mind. Align yourself with hukum, with the divine command. Forget what your mind is commanding should happen right now. God has already decided what is happening right now. And whatever God does is perfect, is beautiful. Whatever life is doing within this moment is far more intelligent than whatever your or my mind can come up with. So that is the hukum, that is the reality of this moment. Now, is what is happening in this moment predetermined? I don't think that the entirety of the timeline of the universe has already been written down in some book. And we're simply one chapter along and all the other chapters have already been written. In the same teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, in the Japji Sahib, it says, Ji jaat ranga ke nav sabna likhya vudi kalam. He says there are all these beings of different sizes and shapes and colors and names, all of creation, they are being written by this one continuous pen. It means that the story is being written. It has not been written already. What is going to happen tomorrow has not been decided yet. Everything you do in this moment will decide what will happen in the next moment. Everything that has happened up till now is the hukum, is the reality. This is what is happening right now. And everything you say and do, every interaction you have, whether it's in your control or not, will determine the next moment. Sabna likhya vudi kalam. This one huge continuous pen is writing everyone's story right now. As we speak, everything you say is writing the next word, the next moment of your story. What that does is it allows you to let go of the future. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. It doesn't mean that you don't put effort in. It doesn't mean that you don't make an effort to improve the lives of yourself, your loved ones, your family. Of course, you should do all of those things. But you don't hold on to an idea of what the future is going to turn out like, because you have no idea what is coming next. What are all the other things that need to happen in order for that future version of you to manifest itself? So we're not worried about the past, we're not worried about the future. Right now, what is reality? Hukum can only happen now. There is no hukum for tomorrow yet, and yesterday's hukum has gone. Right now, the reality of this moment is hukum, that divine command that is being acted out right now. See if you can keep your mind here in this moment and not create a new fantasy about the next moment. See if you can relabel this moment as the hand of God. Even now, God is flowing. Even now, God is dancing. The words coming out of your mouth, that's God. The movement of your arms and legs is the dance of God. Become that instrument of God. Whatever music God wants to play, let it play through you.
Vijay, if ego is what we have to let go of, and what should we do when it comes to self-respect? And do we need any amount of ego to grow in life? Because if I try to lose the ego in me, I tend to be happy with just the way I am. And that might not be the best of my capabilities.
That's a very interesting question. If I let go of my ego, does it mean that I have no more ambition in life? It's interesting that we use words like ambition, success, growth, self-improvement, and yet none of those words are the words used by spiritual masters. They do not talk about ambition. They do not encourage you to get the next promotion. Because they know that if you're miserable now, you'll be miserable then. How many of you have got the promotion and then worried, the first thing when your manager tells you got a promotion, you think, does that mean I have more responsibilities? Right? Immediately your mind goes into the problems. Does that mean I have to work more hours? So society encourages you to be the best you can be. To keep going further and further and further in external pursuits. When was the last time you asked yourself about your spiritual ambition? When did you create an ambition that I want to be the happiest I can be? You assume that growth in worldly ways will relate to your happiness. And yet, when you're a child, you get taught in school, money does not buy you happiness. That's the one thing you're taught in school that when you grow up, you completely forget. Money does not buy you happiness. Now spend the rest of your life getting qualifications so that you can get more money, so that you can be happy. What's going on? Which one is right? So the masters have no interest in your ambition. If you go to the master as a king or a beggar, they do not look at you in any different light. They look at the quality of your character, they look at the content of your mind. So, if you let go of your ego, that is a huge achievement. I wouldn't worry if I let go of my ego, what's going to happen next. That alone is a big enough challenge for you to worry about before you start thinking about what's going to happen next. The truth is that that question has a fear inside of it. There's a worry there. If I let go, then what will happen? Will I be rejected by my family and friends? Will I be an outcast? That is the one thing that you need to go and look back in history. Look at the spiritual masters. Were they boring people that nobody wanted to spend any time with? No. The exact opposite happened. They became so interesting that all the people around them gravitated towards them. Even kings and emperors would go and take their advice. So even though there's a worry that your mind is created, do I want to let go of this ego? Am I going to lose too much? The gurus have said if you give up your ego, you get the universe. You get connection. You get everlasting bliss and happiness. You say, yeah, but will I be driving the nicest car? That's kind of how we're bargaining with our spiritual teachers. Yes, I agree that I'll get spiritual happiness. But what about my job? So something for you to think about. Remember, there have been spiritual masters on all spectrum of society. There have been spiritual masters that have been absolute beggars, with not a penny to their name. And there have been spiritual masters who've been kings. That is not the thing that we need to focus on. Because the truth of the matter is, the reason that you had masters on all ends of the spectrum was because they were completely detached from the world around them. The master who was a king was no happier than the spiritual master who was a beggar. They were all completely internally happy. They had no care about what was happening in the outside world in terms of their circumstances. The outside world didn't determine their inner happiness. So the only thing the spiritual masters are asking you to focus on is your inner happiness. Once inner happiness is achieved, you yourself will not be concerned whether you're driving the biggest car or whether you have the best promotion. Because that is not a factor that's now determining whether you're happy or not. So focus on the inner spiritual wisdom. The masters do not care about your ambition or your promotions.
As a student, I'm told that God has a plan for everybody and things will work themselves out. I just want to know, to what extent do we rely on God's plan rather than our own efforts? And going on from that, if you're not achieving what you want in life, do you accept that that's God's plan, or do you keep trying?
An inevitable question when we talk about accepting life, walking on the path of reality, is, does acceptance mean inaction? Do I not need to do anything else? And the simple way to think about it, and how much effort is required, is try to lie in bed all day and do nothing. What will happen? At some point you'll need to get up. At some point, the way that the system has been created, you will need to stand up and, as a bare minimum, you'll need to go to the toilet. The system has created activity as a necessity that's built into reality. Now, the reality is that this is where the wisdom doesn't answer on a case-by-case basis. You have to make your own decision at some point as to whether your efforts are going to continually work or not. And this is true of anyone who is older than you and has more life experience than you, will tell you that you keep trying until you come to a realization that actually I've tried really hard and I've given it my best shot, but ultimately all the signs are pointing to the fact that this isn't meant to be. The hardest thing is at that point, can you accept that this wasn't meant to be? Because you've spent so many months and years with this vision in your mind that this is the reality that's going to happen. I'm going to build this into my life. And that's the thing that keeps you going. I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep achieving it. You're talking about it to other people. This is where I'm going to go in life. This is what I'm going to achieve. But when it doesn't happen, do you then relax into that moment and say, it's okay? All the effort that could have been tried was tried. It wasn't meant to be. Or then do you go down this negative train of thought, which is, I'm a failure. My life is so terrible. That is where you're not accepting the reality in that moment. So the simple fact is, you're going to keep trying until you hit that dead end, until that point in your life. And sometimes you'll hit rock bottom and you say, I can't go any further. And that's the point where you realize, I've been trying too much. This is not going to work out. Sometimes you'll keep trying something and you feel like giving up, and a new gust of inspiration is going to come. Someone else is going to open a door for you. Something's going to happen. And you'll say, oh, this is what I was waiting for. So activity is inevitable. You will have to keep trying. How you decide is based on wherever you are in life in that moment. Many times in life, you will make a decision and you'll say, this is the best thing that I need to do. And in the future, you realize that that might not have been the right decision. And so sometimes we beat ourselves up about a future that hasn't happened. Sometimes we beat ourselves up about a past that happened in a way that we didn't want it to. All of these are just places that your mind can go to create misery. What you do, the actions you do are really irrelevant. Whatever you do is going to give some results, is going to reap some rewards. Where is your mind throughout all of that? Can you find peace no matter what happens? That's something for you to work on. Don't worry about your activities. Your actions will keep going. Whatever else is going to happen next, sometimes you don't even think of a certain path in life. And a door just opens and all of a sudden you end up down a completely different path of life. And you look back and you say, I don't even know how I got here. I had no plan to go down this route. So was that your action? Was that your activity? Was that God? Was that life just playing out a part? All of that, these are the things. Life's going to keep going in so many different directions. Whatever direction you think your life is going to go in, there are so many other things that are going to happen. Where is your mind going to be throughout that? Can you be happy no matter what happens?
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interact with you. My question is that you beautifully explained about the hukam, that it is being written moment to moment, and even you have put a lot of light on other subjects. So what is your take on astrology who are claiming to predict the future?
That's a great question. What is the role of astrology and astrologers who claim to predict the future? My honest answer is that I think I've gone through various different understandings of this. There was a time in my life where I completely wrote it off and saying it's not possible. Then people more educated than me in these subjects would say, actually there is some science towards how these things work. Where I've kind of found the middle path, the balance is, there may be some people who are able to look at charts and things like that and are able to tell moments of the future. I don't know. I've even heard that the people who specialize in things like Jyotish, like a Jyotshi, people like that who go and look at all the astrology charts, they can even pinpoint the moment of your death. That's what they say. Where I've made my peace with it is, I don't want to know. Whether it's possible or not, I don't know. I would rather watch the movie as it's happening. The most annoying thing is when you're watching a movie and somebody's telling you, oh, this is what's going to happen next. So it might be possible that someone has seen the show already, but I don't want to know.